It's like the RC is like a bunch of New York gangsters deciding who lives and dies.
Hey, Kenrith, don't get too out of hand or you have to take a long walk off a short pier.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things CEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, Ryan.
And I'm your host, Ian. And today we are going to be talking about the Rules Committee quarterly update and the unbanning and bannings that have come with it.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty interesting talk today. I'm very much looking forward to it. So I think there's going to be some interesting topics talked about today. But before we go into that, I want to talk about quickly our sponsors. They are TCG Player, they are Dragon Shield, and they are support from viewers and listeners like you over on Patreon. Whenever you're buying products, make sure to buy them from the TCG Player links in the description below. It helps us out, and you also get really great prices, and it also helps local game stores in the process. When you get that product, make sure you put it into Dragon Shield accessories. They are the number one, in our opinion, for protecting all of your products. We were supporting them just through word of mouth and just through purchasing their products before we had even before they were even our sponsors officially. And then finally, obviously, support from viewers and listeners like you over on Patreon. We have a lot of different perks when you sign up to Patreon, merchandise discounts and all kinds of other things, access to our Patreon Discord, I should say. And you get a lot of different perks, and there are a lot of different levels as well. And so your support helps us bring this content to the world. And so we just want to say thank you very much for doing that, and take a look at our Patreon and see if there's any tiers that might interest you.
Speaking of the Patreon, we'd like to shout out one patron today, and that is Jonathan Rich. Jonathan, thank you so much for supporting not only this podcast, but all Playing with Power.
Yes, thank you very much, Jonathan. We really appreciate it. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive into today's topic, and that is, like Ian said, the recent Rules Committee announcement. Now, this announcement was done, this was their September 2021 quarterly update. There were three main things that happened inside of it, although there's probably pretty much only going to be one thing we're going to be talking about according to this old announcement here.
True.
We are going to go over that, and we're also going to read kind of the big ones here to really give context to what we're going to be talking about tonight. So three main things happened as part of this announcement. Number one, there was a rule thing. There was a little rules switch around. Rule 10 was removed. Rule 11 is renumbered to Rule 10. It was basically about how things were subject to a legend rule. It was kind of this old, archaic, outdated thing. And so they went ahead and just removed it because it was no longer necessary. There were cards that have fallen off and jumped on to the ban list. The first one is Worldfire. Worldfire is now unbanned. It's that 9-mana everything gets nuked and everyone's life total becomes 1. It's a red sorcery. And then the idea that Golos, Tireless Pilgrim, has now entered the ban list. They have banned Golos. And that's probably going to be the majority of our discussion tonight.
Most definitely.
But before we go into that, we want to read this to you. So in case you don't have it in front of you or anything like that, we really just want to give the context from the RC's perspective as to the reasons for these bannings and unbannings. So we're just going to go ahead and read this real quick for everyone to give context to the discussion tonight. So we're going to start with Worldfire. So it says, Worldfire was once banned due to the problematic interaction with floating mana and having access to your commander. We want to foster a commander environment where 8 and 9 mana spells are viable and likely to show up in a game, so we evaluate the expensive ones in that context. Unlike Coalition Victory and Biorhythm, which we continue to believe are problematic in that environment, the level of effort needed to make Worldfire effective is sufficient that we suspect it will not be as much of an issue. There are already cheaper ways to do similar things in the format. We believe the social contract and robust pre-game discussions will keep Worldfire out of games in which it doesn't belong. So that's the Worldfire reasoning. Now let's read the Golos reasoning. Golos Tireless Pilgrim has been a much discussed card that is both popular to play with and unpopular to play against. There are many problems with the card, but the greatest is that the low to middle tiers where we focused the ban list. Golos is simply a better choice of leader for all but the most commander-centric decks. This presence crushes the kind of diversity in commander choice which we want to promote. You can drop in Golos and a few 5-color lands into a random deck and get all the ramp and card advantage you would ever want from a commander with no worries about your mana base. Golos' ability effectively reduces the commander tax to 1, it being that versus 2, and once you hit 7 mana, with Golos assuring that you have Wooburg and helping you get there quickly, you don't need to do anything for the rest of the game except cast spells for free. Something we always want to be careful about. We've talked to the folks in Studio X, and they understand the problems created by generically powerful 5-color commanders that don't have Wooburg in their mana cost. We don't expect similar cards to come from them in the future, so a surgical strike now makes sense. We understand that many players love Golos, so we don't take this action lightly. In the end, the health of the format is our primary concern, and we find Golos unhealthy. While Kenrith, the Return King, is a similarly flexible and popular commander for good stuff 5-color decks, we see it as a clear step down from Golos. Alright, so that was what they had cited as their reasoning. Before we dig in any further, there were 2 things I do want to quickly clarify. They said, we've talked to the folks in Studio X. Studio X are the people that help design Magic. They're part of a WotC team that helps design cards that get put into sets. That's what Studio X is, so that's what they're talking about with Studio X. And then secondly, it says, we don't expect similar cards to come from them in the future, so a surgical strike now makes sense. They should have used surgical extraction there because that would have been so much cooler. Just saying. just saying. Surgical extraction. It was so beautiful. Why didn't you do that? It was right there, man. So, anyway, all right. I've blabbed on already enough. Let's get the Worldfire thing out of the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Ian, start us off. How do you feel about the Worldfire coming off the ban list and entering into the wild?
Sure. So it's actually kind of funny because my Discord, as I mentioned before, is like a really big brewing space. So the amount of like people who've started the sentence, "Hey, what do we think about guys, I just don't think it's a thing." like they get through one message and then like the read receipt is 2 minutes later and it's just absolutely nothing. Yeah. And it's a fun splashy card, right? It is. And to be honest, it's something I think I would have enjoyed playing on the casual side of the format because the idea to me, and like I was talking with a coworker who's not a CEDH player, and he was talking about the idea that like you resolve a word fire, and it's just the idea of like, all right, guys, race to the top deck. Who's gonna get there? Like we find that hilarious. And so that's Worldfire seems like a fun card. I mean, yes, obviously people having their entire setup nuked is like one thing entirely. Like. It's a counterable card. I'm not saying that's always going to show up in the casual side of the format, but it's a counterable card. It is 9 mana. And, like, Insurrection is a, 8-9 mana spell that ends games?
8. Yep. 8 mana sorcery. Yep.
And Worldfire is, in my opinion, worse than that. Because it doesn't take all the work your opponents have been doing and then, like, use it against them. Worldfire just says, all right, let's see what happens. Or 13 mana, yeah, I got you with Jessica in the command zone, or 12 mana. Like, you did it. You got there, buddy. You got there. Yeah. Exactly. I don't know. Worldfire, it's one of those cards, like, yeah, I get that. I assume in the earliest days of the format, there was probably some nonsense where people were like, I'm tired of going to 1. I'm tired of losing all my stuff, please. But, like, it's fine.
I mean, I'm pretty much in the exact same camp as you. I played back in the day, and, Worldfire was never a thing. It was, I mean, honestly, we didn't see any chatter online about clamoring for its banning. Oh my gosh, Worldfire's ruining this format. Right. People were clamoring about, like, Consecrated Sphinx. Sure. They were clamoring about Deadeye Navigator and Palicron. They were that's what the things that they were clamoring for bans.
Remember when people used to complain about those?
Yeah, those are simpler times. Simpler times. This is so broken. We don't know what to do with ourselves. Run any sort of interaction ever. Just saying, whatever. But Worldfire was just never on any sort of radar. And some some offer the conjecture, and there's some rumblings out there and stuff that have a little bit resurface of Joyra of the Gitu. Basically, you can suspend a couple of things with Joyra for like 2, and then 4 turns later, they finally end the game. So that maybe was a thing back then, where people were like, I don't want them to suspend Worldfire and then suspend an Eldrazi and kill everybody. Okay,
right, but you can do that with Decree of Annihilation nowadays.
You sure can.
Right?
That Joyra didn't get better, guys. She didn't become tier 1 suddenly, And we also live in a different world of Commander. I mean, imagine landing Joyra turn 3 and then saying, hey, guys, you've got a 4-turn clock to do something.
Yeah, you're dead by that point. What do you mean?
It's not uncommon for a Commander game to end in turns 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're just going to sit there and hope to last 4 turns, they're just going to kill you first. And those things will never resolve. So, the RC saw that. They're like, Joyra might get better, but no one's playing Joyra. No one's playing those strategies. Everyone knows pretty understandably now that nuking entire boards isn't a fun play experience, and they kind of steer away from it. So, for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, I was fine with Worldfire to come off the ban list. I understand the sending the message and the unfun play style, blah blah blah. But I'm fine with just Worldfire not being on there. It's like whatever. There's cards that do worse for less, quite frankly. So
by far. And there once again, we have legal effects, as I mentioned, Decree of Annihilation. That is a thing that exists in our format, and it's really, really similar. And I get that it doesn't put the life totals to 1. But there's also many ways to break parity on it that you can't do with Worldfire, right? Like Planeswalkers and things like that. So that being said, the card is so fair. And if something that we will be quoting a lot tonight, it's just edhrec.com, which is if you're on the casual side of the format, or even in the mid to high power side of the format, great place to go. Joyra the Gitu has 979 decks right now. It is ranked number 190. It is not a popular deck, so I think we'll be okay with Warfire.
I think so too. And it's funny that you mentioned those stats, Ian. Tell me something. Segueing into our Golos conversation, could you quickly run down some stats about Golos on EDH Rec for us?
Well, until this announcement, Golos was the number 1 commander on EDH Rec. The Rules Committee banned the number 1 most popular commander in the format.
Number 1 got banned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
now, to their point of diversity, also in reference for EDH Rec, the deck had over 50 sub-themes available on that site. So there's definitely a lot of data to argue the points that they're bringing up there, especially when we're talking about Golos as sort of an umbrella commander, right? That's a very relevant point to talk about. There's not many other commanders say, whatever theme you could think of, you could probably do a Golos thing.
Yeah. So let's talk quickly about the idea of generic 5-color good stuff. That is one of the things they kind of talked about when they said, hey, we don't like these just generically good commanders that you can cast that can allow you to play every card in the format and just get there. So let's talk about that concept a little bit first. And then I'd like to start to maybe get into some opinions, on just how we are feeling about it. So start off for me, how do you feel about just generic 5-color good stuff commanders?
Okay. So as someone who likes brewing in the fringes of our format, I'm not a big fan of 5-color generic good stuff commanders. I think here's a perfect example for me personally. Cody exists, right? And it's a force to be reckoned with in our section of the format.
Yep.
It is a high pressure card. Cody can so easily operate under a blood moon.
Yep.
It is a 5-color commander that almost does not even care about a blood moon, because it is a generic casting cost and a generic activation cost that fixes your mana with its ability.
Yep.
I literally was playing a game at Tier 1 Con where Cody was just like, yeah, there's a blood moon out. Am I supposed to care? Like,
I guess I just win
like,
now. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Yeah.
I don't have to sacrifice my Surprising Scary now. Darn. like,
hot piece of text, present scary, ladies and gentlemen. That's funny.
But yeah, I mean, to me, that doesn't scream healthy for the format. That's like my perfect example of that is that when you give commanders like that the ability to operate like colorless commanders or one color commanders, it's not great. Now, I think certain commanders can be super fun that happen to be 5-color commanders? Yeah, I think Cody as a concept, maybe not the current implementation, is a really cool card. I think Kenrith is a really cool card. I think Najeela is appealing to people who are not me. And
to everyone else but Ian.
To everyone else but me. I might just be tired of Najeela at this point, but
that's fair.
That might go to speak to how I feel about the generically powerful in the command zone 5-color commander that is Najeela, right? So that's just my reflections on that in our format right now.
In my opinion, up until the last, I would say, 5 years, all of the 5-color commanders were super specific.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't just generic good stuff commanders to help you play any card you wanted to play. You really had to commit to something when you were playing a 5-color commander. Slivers is a classic example. You want to play Slivers, you pick one of the 5-color commanders, you can play on the Slivers. Awesome, great. Everyone's built a Sliver deck once, realizes it's boring, and they take it apart. I can hear all the Sliver people typing right now. That's not true. I love my Sliver deck. That's fine, bro. I get it. It's cool.
I'm pretty sure that was like my second big commander
it's
deck.
Everybody's second deck. It's everyone's second deck. They're like, oh, whoa, cool, Slivers. It built itself, and it's not fun. Okay. So that was a literal impression of a Sliver player.
Yeah, I think I know exactly who you're talking about.
Exactly. So, but like also like a Tog, you know, like you're having these crazy commanders that are 5 colors, and a lot of times if you wanted to build 5-color good stuff or something like that, you were kind of forced to play with one of these characters. And they were just, they were honestly just sat in the command zone. You really weren't using them. And then kind of the shift started to happen where it was kind of, they weren't just the color representation so you could build anything. They were just like, hey, these are just generically good, and they keep coming out with them over and over and over again. And it's really come to the shift from the janky, wild 5-color stuff over to these, like, oh my gosh, why wouldn't I just run this in whatever deck I'm building? Because then I'll have access to XYZ colors, and I can actually just do this as a backup game plan. And so, like, that whole 5-color generic good commanders thing, there's in a vacuum, I think there's some weight to that idea that, these commanders are just kind of, what's the best way I can say it? They're kind of sucking the creativity out, Why wouldn't I build it? Yeah.
Even historically, when it comes to CEDH specifically, we can talk about the progression of Hermit Druid, right? Where we talk about Hermit Druid used to be a Scion of the Ur-Dragon deck. Now, would you ever really use Scion of the Ur-Dragon? Almost never. But it was 5-color Scion Druid, right? And that was like one of the premier decks historically back in the day. And we can talk about even the progression of Food Chain. Food Chain started out as General Tazri. You used to have to play 3 terrible allies in your deck as your win conditions. And then Niv Mizzet got printed for like 4 months, and that was like, oh my god, they printed this 5-color commander that's generically powerful and broken, and now we only have to play some weird multicolored cards. And then they were like, just kidding, Cascade, woo!
Yeah, first Sliver. Forget Niv Mizzet, he's nothing.
Exactly. Niv Mizzet's over there crying in the corner. He's like, I was reborn. Why doesn't anyone care?
And Tasseri's like, all right, man. She's already drinking. It's like, whatever, dude. Don't even get me started.
But like looking at that progression, you could just see how much these commanders, and those are commanders that are still 5-color casting costs. Ironically, Tazri was the one without the 5-color casting cost.
Yeah. And then it kept getting worse, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Like all of a sudden now we're getting Golos, where it's like 5 man of any color. Let your Soul Ring help cast him.
Yep.
And then we have Kenrith, where it's like
Yep.
4 and a white. Okay, once again, let your Soul Ring help cast
Pretty
him.
digestible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super easy to charge him onto the battlefield
Yeah.
and power him out and then get him out there and start doing things. And Golos
Yeah.
was the same because
Yeah.
Golos had this, I think it was 8 mana. Is it 8 mana or 7 mana?
7 mana.
It's 7 mana activated ability that was Wooburg +2.
Right.
And it was like he allowed you to ramp,
Yeah.
So one of the things that Golos does is it allows you to find any land. So if you want to go get the World Tree, rock and roll.
Yeah.
You go get World
Right.
Tree and do it.
Yep.
If you want to go get, I think it's Gemstone Array or Quarry or something like that.
Cascading Cataracts is the one that fixes your mana, right?
That's it. Yeah. And
so people would play monocolored Golos decks, right? And then they would just go tutor up their Cascading Cataracts and activate Golos.
and think about that.
Yeah.
So I think that really brings a really good point to the table. Think about that concept. We actually, one of the old members of Playing with Power, Folger, he built a mono blue Golos deck. It was a Devotion deck. He would build up a Devotion to like 40 and then cast Thassa's Oracle with like 40 cards in his library. It was hot. It was a casual deck. It was hot. But what did he use as the commander? Golos.
Yeah.
What did he
Nykthos.
fetch? Yeah. What did he fetch with it? He'd fetch Nykthos. Or if it got interrupted and he had to cast it a second time, he had to go on a backup strategy, go fetch the 5-color fixer and just start doing stuff with Golos.
Yep.
And there's something real to be said of that. He was building a mono blue Golos deck.
Yep.
Like, why are you using a 5-color commander to build a mono-colored deck?
Yeah.
And that says something about the pushed how pushed Golos ended up being, where people are using it for monocolored decks.
Yeah. I had an identical experience where I was playing a deck that was built around getting a very bad casual card called Arena, which is a land where you pay 3 and 2 creatures fight each other.
Yep.
And it was meant to be like the jankiest of all Janks decks. But then Golos came out and I was like, oh, my commander tutors Arena.
I have Arena in the command zone.
But it was
can't
still
lose.
it was a 2-color deck. I was like, I don't care. I can just cast Golos and get my land. Whatever.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the RC isn't just pulling things out of nowhere.
Right.
You don't have to go far into your LGS, to your local play group, to your local meta, and find stories like this of Golos.
Yeah.
And some people may be listening to the podcast right now being like, oh, these guys are bought and paid for, you bunch of shills for RC. This podcast is not done yet. We've got a lot to say. So, but I do want to at least put that context there that says we do kind of see what they're talking about here.
Yeah.
We are seeing this in the wild. We are seeing what their concepts are coming from a term of homogenization, which we'll kind of touch on a little bit more here in just a minute.
And it's even whenever you're talking about anything that people might disagree on, it's I find it always very important. You have to acknowledge the positives of something you might disagree with before you acknowledge what you have criticisms with, right? So we're not just going to come up here and be like, they don't know what they're talking about. That's not helpful. It's not productive conversation. However, recognizing, yes, there are logical arguments being made here. If we have disagreements with them, if we don't really like what's being said here, we can still say that afterwards.
All right, let's get right into it. I want to hear what and we'll start dissecting other stuff in here a little bit, but let's get this out of the way now. How do you feel about this banning? Whether it be Worldfire and Golos by itself, how do you feel about it on a personal level?
I'm frustrated. And I'm frustrated because of language that has been used before, specifically when the Flash discussion was happening. A lot of language was referring to the fact that taking away something that people were playing in the casual side of the format was absolutely unacceptable. And here we are, 2.5 years later, maybe a little more, because these were the early parts of this discussion, so probably about 3 years later. Here we are having the RC saying, this is everybody's most used toy. I'm going to take this away. And it's fine if that's a decision you're going to make. but you have to be consistent. And if you're updating your policy, then say that too. But these are two separate things that blatantly contradict each other, and it's hard not to be frustrated by that. Now, do I think Golos was healthy for the casual side of the format, for the mid-power side of the format? Probably not, no. Do I think you should take away the most popular commander? Like, these are things that I just feel like contradicts so many logical arguments they've made in the past, right? If you have a new player who comes in and sees Golos and they're like, wow, there's like a ton of cool lands. Like, I picked up this really cool land off my draft deck. Maybe it goes and fetches some man lands, or I want to build a 5-color commander, but I'm still struggling to really get how mana bases work, and I don't want to sit there and be mana screwed all game and not understand how to cast my commander, right? We're talking about like the early players, and I might be getting this perspective a lot because I work in childcare, so I like teach kids how to play Magic, and they're all getting into Commander, and these are things that I like think about because that is part of the audience, right? The people who have like just that's a big part of the Commander audience, actually, is not just like kids specifically, but people who are just coming in and enjoying this format. Maybe they play once or twice a month. So taking away a tool that they have, a resource, I don't know how I feel about that. Now, obviously, there's the counter argument of you're also taking away what the RC perceives as negative situations that they would experience that would make them play the format less. I don't know that I agree that Golos was... I mean, I haven't played enough mid to low EDH in some time, right? It's been a couple of years. I don't think Golos was at that level.
This one was tough for me. And the reason that it was difficult was because of, number one, a couple of similar things you were saying. Like, it did definitely feel like there's almost contradictions. Like, we were on the side of CEDH when basically the world was on fire.
Yeah.
They actually made that as a reference to why they banned Flash. When
Correct.
Your house is on fire, you don't ask them about why, you help them put it out.
Yep.
You know? And so we really thank the RC for that. But we were talking about something that was tearing down the foundations of our entire format. And when you kind of extrapolate that and you dig into Flash a little bit more, a lot of the conversations that were coming out were things like, why do this if it's not as good as Flash? Mm-hmm. Why build this strategy if it can't beat Flash? And what that was creating was this homogenization of the top end of our format. And there was no diversity anymore because nothing could beat Flash. And so we were clamoring for its banning because it was hurting. It was definitely hurting our end of the format. And so now we are seeing some similar conversations. We're saying it's homogenizing the format. Why would you build this when you could just use Golos? Why wouldn't you just put Golos in here? Like, like you said earlier with the stat with EDH rank, EDH rack, the ranking of it and the themes. There are 50 themes for Golos.
Yeah,
that means he was built so many different ways. He, she, they, whatever. They were built so many different ways.
Yeah,
like there wasn't like it didn't tell you to build a certain way. It was just build however you wanted.
Yeah,
depending on who you're talking to, that's a good thing or that's a bad thing.
Right.
But it still had the conversation of homogenization around it. It's all getting homogenized into this one commander, this one card, whether it be Flash or Golos. The main difference, in my opinion, was I didn't hear a soul clamor for Golos' banning. EDH Rec told me that no one was clamoring for its banning because everyone was using it. So... like, you know, the CEDH community, they were screaming from the rooftops. They were yelling into whatever megaphones they could find, saying, please help us ban this card, this Flash card. I didn't hear a peep of that about Golos. And so I can understand why people are upset. Mm-hmm. And I also am left scratching my head a bit, wondering why they banned the number one card. Mm-hmm. One of the things that happened that really frustrated me in the early days of CEDH was that, or at least my early days in CEDH, this was 2018, 2019, CEDH was a boogeyman. everyone, oh, you were part of a bad club when
Yeah.
you were in the CDH club. People did not like you.
Yeah.
And there was all this stigma around CEDH.
Yeah.
And they would say, you're bad. And whatever. And so disseminating that and dissecting that down to its most bare bones argument was, we don't like that you're having fun in a way that we don't like having fun. We want to tell you how you should be having fun. And that's what has always been the problem between the casual EDH and the CDH communities for a long time.
Yeah.
You're not having fun the way we're dictating you should have fun. A lot of strides have been made to blur those lines, and everyone, for the most part, gets along. The corners are always a problem. But
Yeah.
this feels like that. Hey, we are going to tell you how you should have fun. We don't want you to build generic 5-color commanders. We want you to go find a commander that you got to force to work. We want you to have fun in the way that we're dictating you have fun. And it stinks a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And that I don't like.
So that's a fantastic point. They, as far as I'm aware, and this is information that I have been given by other people talking about this publicly and things. There was a single member of the Commander Advisory Group in support of this decision. In support, meaning every other Commander Advisory Group member disagreed with this decision. I'm not going to speak for them directly. This is, as I said, information that I have
Rumors,
received
conjecture. We are not speaking for the CAG right now.
I also know that the aforementioned member was the only person I have ever gotten into an argument with on social media about that literal conversation in which they were saying, we disagree with the way that you are playing the format. And they were saying it very blatantly and very counterintuitive to many healthy productive conversations I've had with CAG members, with Sheldon himself. All fantastic conversations that were completely backstepped by the only CAG member in support of this decision. So for me, a lot of your sentiment here strikes true. So it's off-putting. It really is. Yeah. It makes me concerned about the decision-making now. And if you have an advisory group that's supposed to be speaking for the people who you represent, and a single member agrees with your decision, that's got to raise some flags, right? Like, there's what?
They're supposed to be representative of the community at large. They're supposed to bring these different types of topics and different types of dissenting opinions to the RC to help them make better informed decisions.
Right.
It is not the CAG's job to make these decisions. They are an advisory group.
Yes.
So they're going to ask them their opinions, and at the end of the day, it's the RC's job whether or not they want to take those opinions or not.
Yes.
However, if what you're saying is true, because once again, we don't have inside information of any kind, so we are not making that claim. But if this is true, that is suggesting that they said, we heard you, we're just not listening to you. Which raises a bunch of other problems.
Yeah.
and there's only so much tape available on my hard drive to record this episode, so we can't just get into it, unfortunately. Right. So
I feel like this is a time for me to drop my really hot take for this episode.
Ian's hot take. It's going to be a recurring thing on. It's like, okay, it's hot take time. Let's go, Ian.
If you were gonna do this, if you were gonna take out a commander that stood for being 5 colors and being castable in a way that is not a 5 color, you should have taken them all out. That's my hot take for this episode. If you were gonna make this stance, if you said we've talked to Wizards and they're never gonna do this again, then you take out Najila, you take out Ramos, you take out Tazri, you take out every single commander that represents that. I think this is a weird halfway stance.
I see what you're saying. I also know that the RC doesn't do that because they were talking about the wheels problem with the Hull Breacher band. Like, we don't want to ban a group of cards. Yeah. We want to create the flagpole or the signpost that represents those cards. Right. And it would be tough to say, guess what, guys? All of these are banned, and we're going to have to keep updating the ban list every time they get pushed out because there's nothing that says that Studio X is going to listen to them.
That's super valid.
Just like the CAG And the RC, they can take the advice. Once again, we don't know this. We're in conjecture land right now. Alice in Wonderland kind of levels of stuff here. But Studio X doesn't have to follow the recommendations of the RC.
And as far as they're concerned, right? Was it Core 19, the set that Golos is from, right? That already sold.
19 or 20.
Yeah. That already sold, right? So you can say, hey, look, we're gonna print some broken commander cards. You guys want to ban them? You do you, right?
This is on you, not us. Remember, it's your format. We can't have it, and so this is on you. So, and if they wanted to burn the format to the ground so that they could take it over, they could absolutely just disregard everything the RC said. It'd be a bad idea.
We're not trying to plant conspiracies into the tree here. Just saying, like, it's just because this is an advisory statement doesn't mean it's going to happen. You're right, 100%.
Yeah. And so far, everything that we've talked about in this little segment has absolutely just been conjecture. We are not privy to the CAG. We are not privy to the RC. We're not privy to... For all we know, that everything that we heard was untrue. It ended up being 100%. false. So please understand that, everyone listening. Please understand that we do not know, and we are not stating that these are the facts. But if these are true, I would say that there's some cause for concern.
And I also do want to be clear, I am not like taking whispers from, it's not like my friend Steve was like, I heard only one CAG member was in support of this. These are, I'm going off of public statements made by figureheads. I just want to be clear here, while we're also being clear that I am just repeating what I've heard. I'm also just not repeating what I've heard off of my comedian friend MTG Joe. Rumor mill. Exactly. From the rumor mill and the Discord DMs. That's right. I promise I'm not coming in here on week 2 just spouting utter nonsense.
Oh, so funny. So at least some of these statements can be verified so long as the Twitter accounts are still up and you can still view them and stuff like that. So there is some verification that's in these. But once again,
feel free to
now that we've covered ourselves every way to Sunday, now that we're nice and covered,
the team at Playing with Power is no longer responsible for the opinions.
I seem to be taking abnormally large amounts of precaution, and I don't know why, because I don't care that much. But going back to what we were saying, I mean, to be 100% honest, this is concerning to me. This definitely feels almost like a contradiction, and I'm not going to lie, this took me, and from what I've been reading on the internet, a lot of people very off guard.
I was so caught off guard. I have an obsessive knowledge about this game, and like Hullbreacher, they made a statement. They were like, hey, this guy sucks, he's probably going to go in a couple months. And then people were like, what? And I was like, guys, they said it. They straight up said it. But this one, they were like, and Golos is gone. You're like, sorry?
Like, surprise.
They're like, what?
You're like, hey guys, look, Warmfire. Look at this card. Isn't that wild?
It does really feel like the softening. They're like, we brought you a Worldfire, though. And you're like, get out of here. What do you mean?
Nobody wanted that off the list. No one cared. But like, I didn't see it coming. I saw Hullbreacher coming. I saw that coming. I know that was on people's radars. I know when Sheldon was talking about the problem with wheels are the most problematic part of this. I was like, uh-oh. Sell your foil Hullbreachers, guys. He's going. There's no reason he should be talking about wheels now. Unless, of course, we've gotten the Hullbreacher problem. Anyway, nothing. Not even whispers of Golos being a problem.
Agreed.
And because Golos wasn't a problem in a lot of people's minds. Number 1 commander on EDH Rec. 50 different themes. And talk about homogenization all you want. It was popular. People played it a lot. So what happened? Why? And so kind of disseminating what they were saying a little bit. There was definitely, I think, validity in the idea of homogenization. 5 generic 5 color good stuff. So let's talk about homogenization a little bit. Number 1, is that good? Is that bad? Was Golos the culprit? Was it something else? What are your thoughts on kind of homogenization and where Golos may or may not fit into that?
Yeah. So homogenization, and let's to be clear, because I think we've said that word like 80 times without defining it. Not that I don't think our audience will know what this means, but right, it means the idea that we are having our format become so similar, right? What everyone's doing is coming closer and closer and closer together, right? It's what people used to, like, less informed parties would cite about CEDH. They're like, 80 of the same staples in every deck? What do you mean? I don't want to do that, right? They would call it a homogenized format. I thoroughly disagree. But
Yeah, absolutely.
so meta diversity is a huge part of what makes things exciting when you play a format, right? If let's talk about classic examples in Magic the Gathering, right? How many people cite Cawblade as a reason that they stopped playing either a format or part of this game, right? Cawblade being the Jace the Mind Sculptor Stoneforge Mystic deck that was a standard legal deck. And people hated that format because you either played Cawblade or you played the anti-Cawblade deck, which still would often lose to Cawblade. No one played that format. No one wanted to play that format. No one wanted to play during the Flash Winter. People I know, people who I don't know personally, people who were figureheads of the community, quit CEDH because of Flash. Because they said there's no point. I was getting into CEDH during Flash Winter and like really, really getting into the format. I was buying my duels at that time, and I had a friend who had been playing CEDH for 4 years look at me and say, I have no idea why you're doing that. This format's gonna die. Because of the homogenization that Flash created. So do I agree that homogenization is extremely unhealthy? 100%. I will never go against an argument about homogenization, which is one of the reasons my hot take came out of this, right? Like, that I agree. Like, if you're going to attack homogenization, there was a really interesting tweet that someone sent out earlier today saying that, now they said it as more of a statement and less of like a think piece, but they said it that Commander should just be 3 colors and under. And while I obviously don't think enforcing that on people is like what you need to be doing right now, I think that would be such a diverse and interesting meta. Like, gone would be the days where all you ever hear is Timna Crom, Timna Thrasios, Crom, blah, 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 blah.
Partner 1, partner 2.
Partner
yeah,
1,
exactly.
partner
2, yep.
And would there still be partners? Of course. We have Malcolm Bilesmaster. You'd probably still see Timna and a 1-color partner, right? But you wouldn't see things like Najila. You wouldn't see a lot of this diversity. And now I'm not saying that this is the future of the format. I'm just saying that would be a move that would create diversity in the format. And it would lead away from homogenization. So, did their action align with that ideal that I do support? Yes. I agree. They made a move that on paper, and I really want to be clear about that, on paper leads away from homogenization. And I think this is another part of where my hot take comes from. I think people are just going to move over. I think people are going to go play Ramos now. I think people are going to go play Tazri now or do some jank with that. I think people are going to play Reaper King and occasionally throw some Changelings in their deck. I think people are just going to step over to a different 5-color commander. And I think people are... You know what's going to happen? In obviously just an opinion. They talked about how Kenrith isn't as bad. Well, guess what? You just took a bunch of 5-color decks that do a bunch of generic value. You took away their 5-color commander. What are they going to go do next? The next commander that does that, which is probably Kenrith. So I don't think this does anything. I think you took a half step here. And you can say you're flag posting as much as you want, but the reason the ban list exists is because flag posts don't always work. You can't just say, hey, you should probably avoid these type of things. That's not how people interact with this format. They see a ban card and they're like, oh man, I can't play that ban card. What else does the thing that I'm trying to do that this ban card didn't do? You took away my deck, here's the next deck. And now I'm worried for Kenrith. Because Kenrith, in my opinion, is a far more interesting commander than Golos. Yes, I totally agree. It does some really cool, unique stuff. It has group hug implications, although we do some really broken stuff with it. But I literally got really excited about a Kenrith list right before this ban, and I'm afraid to sleeve it up right now because I don't know if next quarter it's gone. They're just shifting the problem.
And I think all your points are really, really interesting because I think a lot of them are right on point. So when we talk about homogenization, I 100% agree with you. It is healthy to battle homogenization. Magic is more than just a game, despite what everybody says. I'm sorry. Magic is also a form of self-expression.
Yeah.
There's a reason not everybody comes with a tier 1 list at every tournament, at every table. They want to also express their style through their colors, through their archetypes, through their tribes. All of those things. Magic is also a form of self-expression. Homogenization makes people lose their identity in the game. And that's when they become disinterested, and that's when they leave. Okay? When every game plays out exactly the same, that's not what Commander was originally invented for. It was to get away from the tournament grinding, cutthroat way that everyone played Magic. That's why all the level 4s and level 5s created Commander.
Right.
They used the old Elder Dragon Highlanders. That's where EDH as an acronym came from.
Right.
And that's why they made it. And then when you see everything homogenizing together with the perfect example of Callblade, I played during those days to show you how old I am. And it was not good. It was bad. It was really, really bad. So much so they had to ban Jace the Mind Sculptor because he was in every deck. You know, they actually banned him in standard. Whatever. Jace is Jace is Jace. So
Jace
whatever.
is Jace,
It's a side topic. But homogenization isn't healthy. So you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. But as they print the new best card out there is a certain degree of homogenization that happens whether we like it or not. Right. And a lot of times whenever they look in retrospect with their 2020 hindsight vision, they always say, yeah, that was a mistake. Arcane Signet is the classic example. There was no better 2-drop rock out there. So now your deck is no longer 99 cards. It's now 98 cards, you know? And by the way, Commander isn't the 100th card, it's Sol Ring.
Yeah.
Sol Ring is always number 1 card, and then you pick a Commander and your other things. And that's because it's been homogenized. And then it kind of keeps doing that. If you put green in your color identity, guess what? Your deck just became 50 flex slots now. Because you put your Cultivates and your Kodama's Reaches in there. And just you're why wouldn't you run them green cards? And that's homogenization. And in order to battle and help fight homogenization, the tough part lies in what do you do with the tools you have to be able to fight it. You know, do we ban Cultivate? Sol Ring? No, that's not really doing what we are wanting to do here. So what do? You look at the number 1 homogenized commander, which is Golos, and you say, look, and you what do they say? You make an example out of him. You say, I'm gonna make an example out of this guy. I'm gonna send him packing.
Yeah, he's sleeping with the fishes.
Would be a shame if your Kenrith didn't make it home tomorrow.
Oh man, it's like we're joking about it, but that's kind of how I feel.
It's scary.
Like a shame if your Kenrith became real popular, then we'd have to
would be a shame. I can just see like they all have like their Capone hats on, all the RC and stuff,
smoking cigars.
Would be a shame if your Kenrith didn't make it home. But like. Another interesting side point you made, because when you said I was worried about Kenrith, what I thought was really interesting was when they made the announcement, obviously the site went down, but another thing that happened was everyone hopped over to TCG Player. And what did everyone see happening? All the World Fires got bought up. And there was like 2 left. I was like, why in the world isn't everybody buying Kenrith right now? He's the commander if you're specking on prices to be buying right now. Because everyone now has a card without a commander, and they need one because they still want to play their Maze's End or whatever. And they're just going to go to the next generic good one. And this is actually an argument that I've heard before, not from a banning standpoint, but from a why CEDH shouldn't be part of CEDH, or why CEDH should be its own format. And the very long short of it is if you get rid of CEDH today, if you split it, you say, I'm splitting, CEDH is its own format, go off and die, because that's what we want, right? That's what all the casual players, quote unquote, want. They want the CEDH players to go away. You didn't solve anything by doing that, because all the cards that CEDH players used are still legal in your format.
Right.
You didn't fix anything. Everyone would just still play, or there would just become a next best one. So let's say that you try to take a surgical strike, a surgical extraction, and nuke all the problem, like you nuked Hermit Druid, and you nuked Thassa's Oracle, and you nuked all the things that are quintessential CEDH cards. And you said, that'll show them. Everyone will just build a next best one. And that's what's going to happen with the next 5-color commander. Golos got banned. Okay, there are tens of thousands of Golos decks out there right now that are now needing a commander. We're about to see a bunch of Kenrith from the casual spaces. And you're not going to be able to do things exactly the same. Like, Maze's End just isn't going to work as much anymore.
Which is so sad.
Yeah, that super crazy cool Maze's End deck.
I think might be way more popular than people would instinctually think.
Good, because I don't instinctually think it is. So you taught me something today, because
got you.
Golos was really cool to do that, and now I'm left without my Maze's End deck. Okay, I'm sorry, your foil gates that are worth 50 cents are now worth a quarter. I'm sorry.
I've been buying these for years.
I've been saving up for my Maze. I need to stop making fun of people in this podcast. I apologize.
This is a public apology to all Maze's End players. We're sorry.
This is a public apology to eventually all Golos players, which is like half. That's the problem, though. Why did you? Yeah. Anyway. So I agree, kind of going back to what we were saying, that homogenization is a bad thing. Yeah. And I also think that this wasn't the way to fix that, but here's the question that I pose to you. With the tools that the RC has, which, by the way, are a lot more limited than people think they are, how would you fix homogenization?
I feel like I already kind of said it. I
nuke them all?
Yeah. I say you nuke them all. Please feel free to throw down in the comments below how much of a nut job I am, but I would be super interested in. Now this is my hot take as a CEDH player, right? But
hot take number 3 coming in.
Yeah.
So Ian's hot take episode.
If you nuke the 5-color easy to cast commanders, you nuke two-color partners in the command zone, I think CEDH, without changing the power level of the format, becomes super interesting. Now, to be clear, keep cards like Breya, keep cards like Yidris, right? Those are 4-color commanders, but those are actually hard to cast.
Legitimately, right? Yeah.
On top of that, Conquest is a great example, right? Where they are a competitive multiplayer format with a competitive ban list. I didn't like Conquest because, to me, it took out the things that were CEDH. So it took out the fast mana. It took out a lot of the really lean win conditions. It took out the stuff that, one of the main reasons I love CEDH is the nuts stuff you can do in that format, right? You can explode out of nowhere. You can do some crazy stuff. You can do all that stuff. But imagine doing all of that stuff, but being limited to Tassiger or the Mimeoplasm or back to Carador, or even if you're doing Timna Kodama, right? So imagine all the explosive stuff you can do in the format, but just the commanders are now just more diverse. And now this is obviously a CEDH influenced perspective. However, I don't know that would ever hurt the casual side of the format by taking out these generic cards, right? And so if you want to play your really cool 5-color deck, you can do what Josh Lee Kwai has been preaching about for like 8 years, which is play Chromat. Josh Nikolai has been playing his Chromat Nekusar 5-color wheels deck for literally like since I think like the first episode, maybe before that, of the Command Zone podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Back when it was a podcast and not a media network, right?
Yeah, like that is a media empire.
Yeah, exactly, right? So like that is if you ever told me that too many people were playing Chromat in the format, I'd be like, yeah, bet they are.
Yeah, like, whatever you say, man. Oh, homogenization.
Yeah, exactly, right? Oh, man, I'm really worried about Chromat gaining flying next turn for 2 mana. But, like, if you took out those 5-color easy-to-cast commanders, if you took out some way of balancing, like, the 2-color partners, I think that would be exactly what they're talking about here. Just a crippling blow to a homogenization potential. But not a way that, one, feels like a half measure, which is what I feel like is done here today, and 2, doesn't change the things we love about the format. Now, if you're somebody who says, I love Tymna and Thrasios, and that is my like opus, and I love that, that's great. 90% of people don't love Tymna and Thrasios. 90% of people who really enjoy those commanders love the value they generate and love getting pure value from them. Find that in Tasigur. Find that in playing stuff like Seedborn Muse, right? Like, it's not that those things can't exist anymore. You're just making it look more interesting by doing it in different ways and expressing yourself even more. So that's my way to fix homogenization in the format. Feel free to leave in the comments how much of a lunatic I am.
I mean, honestly, I think that is a good solution to homogenization. If you're talking about everyone playing the same decks, banning a lot of the most popular things will make people play different decks. Yeah. But also, what you also kind of did there was answer the question in another way, which it can't be done. They're not going to do that. Like, yeah. And I think 100%. The take is good. I don't think you're really off base there. I really don't. What you are saying is it can't be done.
Basically,
like, there's a reason that they take off this pointless card, and it waves at Golos as it goes by, as they cross each other on the ban list bridge. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a reason Worldfire comes on and comes off and Golos comes on, because if you don't, it leads to arguments. If you do, it leads to arguments. So there's these trades. Commander as a format is monolithic. It takes so much to take one step.
Right.
And so whenever you decide to take a step, you have to do so much in order to take said step.
Yeah.
So to do something to battle homogenization, which we are seeing becoming more and more prevalent, especially in the casual side of the format, we know what CEDH is like up at the top end. Mm-hmm. To say, I'm going to suddenly add 5, 6, 7 cards onto the ban list, the people would riot. To see such an extreme change. I mean, even if you said what you said about the partners changing or something like that, or a certain number of them getting banned, you're like, oh my god, that's tons of cards suddenly getting added to this ban. It's almost, I'm not going to say it's doubling it, but it is definitely exponentially growing.
A ridiculous amount, most definitely. Yeah.
And people would lose their minds from that amount of information pushed on them at once.
100%.
There are going to be their share of people out there that had 3/4 of their decks nuked with that banning. And then they would just quit. Yeah. They wouldn't even come back. They're like, no, I don't want to be a part of this.
Agreed.
But that's what I'm saying. The rules committee, they're not just shooting by the hip, contrary to what I think a lot of people think when they post comments on Reddit, or they start to blow up Twitter, or they start to @Sheldon all the time whenever they say anything. Yeah. They're not just being like, I think we'll do this today. Bang! Hey, let's see what happens. There's that mob voice again. I don't know why that came back, but here we are. It's the mob. It's the mafia themed episode for some reason, and I don't know why. So I have no idea.
Kaboom! Banned.
Hey, banned. Hey, look at that. Hey, this is my
Kenrick's getting out of hand. Boom! Out of here.
Not to mention our impressions are spot on. They're perfect impressions, by the way. Oh gosh. But what I'm saying is that they know what they're doing. They're not just be like, yesterday I was like, I lost a game to Golos, I'm going to ban it. Now they're not. They don't say that. They don't do that. And contrary to what a lot of people who hate the RC and think they can do it better, which I think is laughable.
Yes.
They say that all the time. Oh, he lost to it. That's why they banned it. No, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
And they're doing the best. They're doing the best they can with what they've got.
Yeah.
They have basically one tool at their disposal. Yep. You don't get handed a copy of the philosophy document when you open up a box of a precon.
Right.
You don't get told, well, as we shuffle up, have you guys read the latest commander stuff?
Yeah.
You don't get that. It's
most
kitchen
people won't
table
even know
magic.
that exists.
Exactly. You don't have it. You don't get a copy of the latest comprehensive article that Sheldon wrote about the banning. Whenever their banning happened.
Agreed.
So they don't really have a lot of tools that have the ability to spread as widely as the ban list.
Yeah.
And so that is the tool they have to lean on, unfortunately, whenever they want to see something happen in this format.
Yeah.
So Go ahead.
Going off that, I think one of the reasons that this ban hit me so hard is that until this point, very few things the rules committee have done have actually made me disagree with them. And I'm even talking about, do I think Paradox Engine is actually fine in our format? Yeah. I was still understanding of the Paradox Engine ban. I lost a really nice card that I really liked playing. I know many friends who lost their decks. I lost a deck that I really enjoyed because of
Me
that.
too.
I lost a deck to Hull Breacher. I literally, the day that announcement came out, I messaged the people on the DDB and said, you need to take my list down because it is based on the fact that Hull Breacher exists. And I 100% supported that decision. And there were decisions on decisions that may have been controversial, but I said at the end of the day, they're making the right decision for this format. And that's why this announcement has been so rough, is because this is the first time I've been like, I don't think I can stand behind the RC in this moment. And it's tough. It's tough because I care about this format and it makes me nervous about what's coming next.
I agree. There's a thing. I definitely do not agree with blind loyalty, where you just say everything the R says is gospel. They can do no wrong. I don't believe in that. I think dissenting opinions and healthy conversation and criticism is super important.
Healthy being emphasized very heavily there. Yeah.
Absolutely. No yelling and,
Yes.
saying that they're bad, and which happens every time.
Every time.
But the healthy conversations are so important, even if it's criticisms, even if it's dissenting opinions. And I agree with you. Like, all the decisions from a banning perspective that I have seen as of... the number of bannings over the last couple of years have really actually affected CEDH a lot.
Yeah.
Like, Paradox Engine kind of, for lack of a better word, really kicked it off. Where a bunch of decks just got nuked because Paradox Engine got banned. And we were all like, wow, that really sucks, but we get it. Like you said, you at least agreed.
Yeah.
And I did too. And then Flash got banned.
And but that was a party.
Yeah, exactly. And the casual crowd, they were like,
whatever.
Okay, whatever. I don't care.
Unless they morally opposed with the ban for us.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, whatever. But we absolutely agreed with that.
Yeah.
And then and there was some like Painter Servant Iona stuff going on in there too that nobody cared about.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that was also at the same time as Flash. Which leads into a side point of there's been a lot lately.
Yeah.
There's been a lot. There's been 6 in the last 5 years rolling, not including the racially insensitive stuff that was added to the ban list.
Right.
But like, and then Hull Breacher got banned. And, there was definitely people on, because it was played in high power as well as CDH, wasn't really played in the lower ones as much to my knowledge. But like, that also affected CEDH because we really utilized Hull Breacher. You want to talk about homogenization? If it ran blue, it ran Hull Breacher. There was never a downside to running it, and it just happened over and over and over again. We were like, oh, something in CEDH got nuked, something in CEDH got nuked, something in CEDH got nuked, and so on and so forth. And then this happened, and now we're sitting on the other side of the table because, like, from a CEDH perspective, I can with reasonable confidence say CEDH as a community didn't really care that Golos got banned.
No.
There was
a handful of people, I can't even call it a handful, a similar strategy of Gip Besager, do Turbo Nas, whatever. And I do feel bad for the people who wrote the primer on that list, but like, it was just a 5-color Turbo Nas deck.
We have a lot of those.
Yeah, we have a lot of those. Many that are better. I will say, historically, it's a little sad because Golos was the signpost deck for me that Ad Nauseam was the new kind of king in town. Because this Golos Ad Naus deck had come into the Nexus the Nexus rank season and was like just going nearly undefeated. And I'm like, that's just gone now. Not that I really ever cared about it, but I do have a French foil Golos just rotting away in my binder now.
yeah, but I mean, and that kind of stuff is cool, and having that history. And I agree, he was a signpost in a different way. He ushered in the era of Ad Nauseam back into the phrase of CEDH.
But as far as modern relevance, completely not.
He's been superseded by, ironically enough, more 5-color good stuff.
Oh, hey, look, a problem.
Oh, look, how are we going to solve it? Oh, let's take the least important. Let's let him sleep with the fishes. Oh gosh, that's so good. From a CEDH perspective, we are looking on the other side of the fence now to everyone's worlds getting turned upside down, much like the casual community looked at us from the Paradox engine perspective. And they breathed a sigh of relief. We were like, oh man, that really sucks. That nuked a lot of decks. Entire archetypes and strategies became just non-viable. Like Arkham Dax and Paradox Sisay, they just became non-decks, like your Hull Breacher deck. You said it's not viable anymore. It's just not a deck. And we are looking at the other side of the quote unquote fence now. And we're like, that sucks. We've been there. I feel sorry for you. I feel bad for you. It isn't affecting us as much. But we feel you. Like we're with you. We don't understand either, and we wish this didn't happen to you, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and it's so funny because you're right, the progression of events have literally created an empathetic response from a community who really doesn't care about Golos.
Yeah. We didn't get that in the beginning. We actually got a lot of people spitting at us when Flash got banned. They're like, are you happy now? The tail's wagging the dog and stuff like that. And I'm glad it's not like that so much anymore. Please note that was a little bit more of the past and not indicative of the community today. But we saw what it was like to have certain strategies nuked, and we do feel for you Golos players out there. That sucks. We get it, and we're sorry that it happened. Is homogenization a real problem in the format? That's not a question I know I can answer reasonably. Like, I know what CEDH looks like, and I have a fair idea of what casual looks like. But I don't sit down next to 3 Golos decks every game.
No.
I know that didn't happen. Is there a degree of homogenization where I start to see the same cards a lot every game? Sure. Even in the casual side, I always see a Cultivate. You know? I don't think they should ban Cultivate. You know? Just because I see it a lot doesn't mean it's something that should get banned. But... I feel for both the people who lost their commanders, even and I'm sure there was a lot of them that was their favorite commander, and I also feel for the RC in this one. I'm with you. I don't feel good about this. There's some contradictions. There's some. I don't know if this was the right approach. I'm not saying I've got the answers, but I don't know if this was the right one. But I also feel for the RC because they're trying to maybe solve a problem. That other people were saying is a problem that I don't know is.
Yeah.
And they don't have a good way to solve it.
Yeah.
So
Without going against kind of their own history of behavior, I think. Yeah. They definitely have, they've gone for this signpost mentality before. But I think they've preached the signpost mentality. I think Iona was a big conversation about that, where they were like, no, do we think Iona is intrinsically broken? No. Is it a card we want existing? Absolutely not. And I was like, okay, I get that, right? I get what you're trying to signpost here. But lately, and I think this is probably the most important distinction here, is that the past few bans they've made have not been signpost bans. They have been, this card is not healthy and it's gone now. Paradox Engine, they did not like the play patterns. Hull Breacher, they did not like the play patterns. Golos, it's a signpost, supposedly.
And at the end of the day, I said it earlier and I will say it again, I don't like it when anybody tells me how I should have fun.
I agree.
I received enough of that in all my time at CEDH. I don't need the figureheads of this format telling me you can't play 5-color good stuff. You have to play something with your commander. I don't like that. I don't like it when people tell me how to have fun.
And it's ventured away from a casual mid-power versus CEDH discussion, but the mentality behind it that we're finding problematic is very easy to compare, because it says, okay, they've become woke on this issue, but it seems like the mentality of their decision making feels like an archaic decision making that we thought we moved past. So once again, if you want to nuke a bunch of stuff, then fine. Make that bold choice. Do that bold thing. X out the top half of the format, right? X out those 5-color generic cards. If you're saying, I think this playstyle is unhealthy, nuke the whole thing. Don't take this halfway measure. Because what you're saying is, hey, stop it. But you can still do it.
Yeah. Don't do it with this guy. But, I mean, you're still going to do it. But
yeah. Oh, man. How many... legitimately, I can't wait to, bug the people over at EDH Rec for the amount of new Kenrith decks that are going to be input.
Oh, that are going to suddenly share a lot of the same themes and tribes and...
Shout out to my boy Hire.
cards.
Sorry when your commander is gone. Love you to death, man.
Yeah.
Sorry to everyone I know who loves that commander. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look great.
That leads me into actually another really good point. And this was something that I had talked about on a previous podcast with Jim from the Spike Feeders. He and I talked about Thassa's Oracle and the ever-present conversation of whether or not this card should be banned and blah, 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 blah. The conversation was great. I'm not saying blah, blah, blah for Jim. He was very, very well-spoken, very articulate, knew what he was talking about. And he was talking partially about these things, like what the ban list does and what a ban list is for and the tools that how they can use it as a tool. But another thing that he talked about on that podcast, and I highly encourage everyone to go listen to it, is the number of bannings that you institute in a format. And he talked about, okay, so how many have we had? And that's where I got the figure. We've had 6 in 5 years. At the time, it was 5 in 5 years because Hull Breacher hadn't been banned yet. He says, do you think that's healthy? I said, the bans, there needs to be as many bans as necessary to create the health of the format. And he says, I actually disagree with you there. And I'm paraphrasing. He says, banning too many cards creates instability in a format. And I was like, that was a really interesting point. And he used a euphemism of Canlander or whatever, where you use point systems on cards and stuff. And he says, there's a really good chance that I have a deck that's a Canlander deck in my desk that isn't legal anymore, and I just don't know it. And so there is a certain degree of an eternal format being able to pull out a deck that from EDH that you haven't played in 5 years, and a pretty decent chance all the cards are still legal in it. Now we're getting into this, I'm not going to call super banning, but a big frequency of bans where these cards are suddenly creating instability, saying, I need to look through my 99 to make sure that this deck is still legal.
And not only that, if we take a look at the ban list for what it has been historically, look at the cards that are banned. They were not recent printings, right? We're talking about cards like Biorhythm. I think that's like what? I don't know the exact set on that, but like it is an old card. Coalition
It was an
Victory,
old bordered card.
It's an old border, right? Coalition Victory is the same thing, right?
Invasion,
Sway of the Stars is from one of the Kamigawa sets.
Betrayers, yep.
Yeah. This is Gifts Ungiven, same thing, right? These are like Gristlebrand was one of the few cards that I could think of that was like printed and banned, right?
That boy lasted a month. He did not last long. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the idea there, right? Those were old cards that people aren't just going to go pick up out of their local trade binder and see a new cool card. These last few bans can't say the same thing.
Golos isn't that old.
Nope.
He's not that old.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking like you said with Sway of the Stars and
Yeah.
stuff like that. We're talking like,
To give context, he's on Arena.
yeah,
That should say how new he is, right? Like, he's on Magic the Gathering Arena. That says something there, right?
Yeah.
These are new cards. And that also maybe opens up the conversation of, like, yeah, WotC's really pushed the buck on, like, what is acceptable in our format, right? Like, they have lately. And I understand being the rules committee doing their best. We think about Lutri. It's the exact same thing, right? The first ever pre-ban. It was printed knowing that it would be banned before it ever saw play. Wild
that was a format first.
Yeah. And so thinking about things like that it's relevant to this conversation, I think. And the new cards definitely get more interesting. And the more new cards you remove from the format, the more kids who open a booster pack of Ikoria and don't get to play their Lutri. Can't say that's healthy for the format.
Exactly. You create this instability, as I said.
Yeah.
Not only that, but you're now saying this card that I thought would be fun. Oh, you're in the middle of a game, and all of a sudden you play it. You're like, oh, that's banned. You can't play that. And you're like, oh no, you know, like I didn't even know that was the case. Oh, what a bummer, you know. And it really sours the experience. And the fact that more and more decks out there are becoming more and more unstable. Yeah. You know.
I had that happen with Protean Hulk when that was banned. I had a mono green, literally the commander was like an old Legends card that just made your green creatures get +1/+1. And I just picked up a bunch of dollar store rares and like played those. And midway through the game, they were like, oh, Protean Hulk's super banned. But I was like, it just gets... It gets some creatures out of my deck. It's cool. It's a big creature.
It gets all my mana dorks. What's the
problem?
You know?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's you're right. When those things start happening more and more and more, it hurts the experience of new players.
It does. I mean, and I know that Golos isn't in print anymore, but you know the idea that the Commander Legends Hull Breacher got banned, and the idea that this is now banned, and this was not some random card in the 99 though. This was not card that people were clamoring for its ban. This was not some random thing. This was a legendary commander that helmed thousands of 5-color decks out there. And now all of these decks suddenly don't have a home. And now they're all just going to migrate, and the problem's just going to move to the next commander, which what you said. It's like I worry about Kenrith now because of it's the problem didn't get solved with the banning of Golos.
Yeah. So I'm on EDH Rec right now. And so you have to understand, EDH Rec is a data congregate, right? But it's only from digital platforms. So as far as registered digital decks, right? So these are only people who use deck building websites, which if you look at the context of Commander, as I said, those people who play once or twice a month, they don't register their decks online.
Nope.
I was a invested Commander player for like 5 or 6 years, and I never put a deck list online. So these are registered deck lists who use data information, right? These are those types of people. There are 7,658 just of those on EDH Rec. Imagine how many unregistered Golos decks there are.
And they don't even pull from all the sites.
Yeah.
Like, they're not pulling from Tapped Out. They're not pulling. I don't think they're pulling from Moxfield. If they
I'm
are,
pretty
it's
sure
more
they're not.
recent.
Yeah.
And so these are only from the sites they're pulling from people that are actually entering. It's not even the biggest sample size of what's actually out there.
Right.
So
That's crazy.
7,000 people didn't just lose their deck. We're talking more like 70,000 people or
exactly what
more.
I was gonna
Who
say.
even knows? It's hard to even quantify the number of
Yeah.
how many decks out there just got nuked today.
Yeah. And so whether or not, like, you would argue, like, I've sounded like a radical all the time and, like, for this episode, and, like, my take is super hot, they still made the same decision, right? As you said, there could probably be 70,000 people who lost a deck, right? And they still made a giant, bold stance without committing all the way. Whether, like, it may not look like as bold a stance on paper, but they still nuked thousands,
Tens of thousands.
tens
Tens
of
of
thousands of decks from existence to basically to muscle people into proving a point. That doesn't feel like the thoughtful decision making that I think has been done in the past for the health of the format. That feels like, I mean, it's going to sound stupid, but it feels like bullying. It feels like you're bullying people into playing the way you want them to play. If you're going to make a stance, if you're going to say, I want to create a healthy environment for this format, do it. Commit to it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do this weird power trip thing. Don't take out something that 70,000 most likely people are playing, right? Like, don't take out tens of thousands of decks and not commit all the way. It's so frustrating.
I think while I would say that bully is a strong word,
Definitely.
I don't think it's an incorrect word.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I think that, the rules committee had malice in their intentions?
No.
Of course not. I'll say that right now. But to say that bullying is the phrase that was the word that we might use to describe this, I'd be inclined to agree. Yeah. And the reason is that you said that there is more than likely tens of thousands of decks that got nuked out there, that just got completely, just eradicated. Mm-hmm. And no one was clamoring for this ban.
Yeah, just to prove a point.
Yeah, there was no one who has said, oh, thank God, Golos is gone. I'm so happy. You don't hear that online. You're not reading that from the pulse of the Twitter sphere. No one is breathing the sigh of relief like they did with Flash, with Hull Breacher, with Paradox Engine. They're not breathing that sigh of relief. They're just like, wait, what? Why? Mm-hmm. Where was it a problem? I'm blindsided here. I have no idea what's going on. Yeah. I didn't have a problem with it, and that's. Like I said, I think your word is kind of correct here, and I hate to say that because I have always, while I may not have liked some of their decisions, I've always understood them. I hated that Paradox Engine was banned. I hated it, but I understood it.
Same.
Because I don't want people to not have a good time when playing Commander. That's why we play.
Right.
But that wasn't what was happening with Golos. They were saying it was unfun to play against. I didn't have that. Sure, there was a little frustration here and there when we were playing on the low end of the power scale. Yeah. He could kind of cheat his commander hacks and in that aspect, but I was like,
but you could say that about so many, it's frustrating when people put fast mana in low end power decks. It's frustrating when people put 2-card combos in low end power decks, right? You're not going to be able to remove every single 2-card combo. You're not going to be able to remove every generic person who wants to play like a 5-color strategy. It's not how it works. Like, there's going to be those disparities.
Exactly. It does not have the plainest way that I could say it is, from my perspective, in the communities that I've seen, it wasn't a problem.
Yep.
Is homogenization a problem? Yes. It's something you should always fight and be ever present of.
Yep.
Was Golos the cause of homogenization? Was Golos a problem? No.
Yep.
It was this sacrificial lamb to make this half-measure statement to tell people, don't homogenize, play with the original commanders. And that doesn't sit right with me.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Yeah, and thank you for wrapping up that point there, Ryan. It's a great way to summarize everything. Now, once again, we'd love to hear from you guys out there in the audience. As I mentioned, whether you think that I've been spouting off hot takes all episode, how you guys feel about this signpost mentality from the Rules Committee, whether you think that maybe we're just not seeing the perspective of people who do want Golos gone. And if you definitely have a diverse opinion there, we'd love to hear it. And once again, we're not saying that Golos was the healthiest thing for the format, but we're definitely saying there were problems with the way this was taken about. And we'd love to hear your opinions on this whole debate. Love to hear your opinions on the matter. And, while we're talking ban list, you got any crazy hot takes? Throw them down in the comments below. We'd love to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so before we wrap it up, I just want to just say quickly a big thanks to all of our sponsors again, TCG Player, Dragon Shield, and support from viewers like you and listeners like you over on Patreon. If you're watching us on YouTube, like Ian said, tell us what you think about, this Golos Ban. If you're on your favorite podcast aggregator, whether that be Spotify or any of the others, give us a review. It really helps us spread the word of the podcast, and it's going to go a long way. If you decide to give us a little bit of extra support on Patreon, that goes a really long way as well. But if not, that's okay too. Simply sharing this on Facebook or just giving us a shout out on Twitter is also goes a very long way. We really, really appreciate all of it.
Definitely. And if you're like, hey, that guy with the hot takes sounds like he might have a really interesting place to sort of aggregate his opinions and whatnot, you should check out youtube.com/comedianmtg, which is my personal channel where you can find things like top 4 breakdowns, any sort of opinions I have on this format, maybe less in a podcast form, but deck text breakdowns. Do you want to hear deck ideas from the guy who brewed up Winota? That's the place to check it out. And that about wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and for those listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya. Thank you.
Peace.